Her smile alone can light up the vast plains of central Texas.
Her humor was infectious.
But lovely Rachel Cooke has been silenced at the age of 19.
She just flat disappeared.
It's almost as if the vivacious young college student had been sucked into a black hole or plucked from the earth. Even the sheriff at the time had no answers for anguished loved ones.
He looks me square in the eye and says, "For all we know, an alien spaceship came down here and took her away."
But sadly, the mystery of Rachel Cooke remains just that.
It's a guessing game. People ask me, what do you think happened? I have no clue what happened.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I'd have a memorial tree for my daughter.
When Janet and Joanne Cooke visit this thriving tree of life in Georgetown, Texas, it brings them as spiritually close as they can get to their missing loved one.
She was so pretty, she was so athletic. We were just really, really close, very much alike in a lot of different ways.
Let's go back to when she was a little girl. What was she like?
She was an extremely giving person. If a friend was in need, she was there.
Rachel had one particular passion.
How big a part of her life was running?
It was huge. She got really big into cross-country, track.
She could just keep going like an Energizer bunny. She just kept running and running and running.
Rachel was a Lone Star stunner, but the eternal sunshine and whipping waves of the West Coast were beckoning.
How did she end up leaving Georgetown?
She was always drawn to California. She thought it was a land of vegetarians and, you know, good music and beaches.
And off she went to the coastline near San Diego, where Rachel enrolled in community college. And most of all, she wanted to be with Greg West, a man she met shortly after moving to the coast.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is the real thing. This is it. This is what it feels like. I mean, butterflies, we were so goofy together.
Do you want to pose?
It was incredible. She was amazing.
She was with Greg, and she was very happy with that relationship, and it meant a lot to her. She was just talking to me about, like, I think that, you know, he's the one.
The couple made plans to move in together, and Rachel invited her California boy to Texas for the Christmas holidays. Greg couldn't stay the whole trip. He had to get back to San Diego for work. Rachel planned to be with her family a few more days, but in fact, she would never make it back to San Diego, at least as far as anyone knows.
Tell me about the morning that she disappeared.
That morning, Joanne and I went to leave for work. Rachel was laying on the couch, and I walked over, and Joanne said, "Mom, don't wake her up." And I went over and I kissed on her, and I said, "Love you, bye." And that's what her response was.
She was sleeping.
She was sleeping. Leave me alone, Mom.
Rachel's father, Robert, also left for work that morning, leaving Rachel with the house to herself.
We know that her boyfriend, who was in California at the time, Greg West, talked to her around 9:15, and she was talking about going for a run.
She was fine. She was, happy to talk to me, of course. And then, I said, "Have you been running yet?" She's like, "No, not yet, but I'm gonna go." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Well, just call me afterwards or whatever."
Rachel shakes off the grogginess and suits up for her 6-mile morning run before planning to spend the rest of the day with her dad, Robert.
She was supposed to hang out with her father in the afternoon. He was going to take off work early, and they were going to go shopping. She had a wedding she was getting ready for.
Rachel begins her run in the quiet, rural, familiar, and crime-free neighborhood where she grew up.
When she went running, she ran to the east of her house, and there was a gentleman working on a piece of equipment spreading dirt for a new home that was under construction, and he saw her run by. There was an elderly couple walking in the neighborhood that lived next door to Rachel Cooke, and they saw her as well.
6 different people saw Rachel running that day. Some even saw her finishing up in a cool down just 2 houses from her own. But that would be the last time anyone would ever see or speak to Rachel Cooke.
She disappeared within 100 yards from her home.
It seems unfathomable. A young woman in broad daylight in bright-colored athletic wear seen by scores of neighbors. Here one second, gone the next.
Everybody has a theory, but there's no evidence to support anybody's theory, including some of our theories.
Rachel Cooke vanished in the blink of an eye in broad daylight.
And there were several people in the neighborhood that were residents there that saw her run by them, talked to her, waved at her, knew who she was from the neighborhood because they'd lived there so long.
Rachel disappeared just 100 yards from her family's home in the rural Texas enclave of Georgetown. She was home from San Diego for Christmas break. The spirited young college student was never seen again.
I don't think that people will ever forget Rachel.
Sally Hernandez from our Austin affiliate, KXAN, was one of the first reporters on the case.
It was probably the most famous missing persons case in Central Texas.
And one with a significant number of theories about what happened.
Can you explain to me the significance of where we are right now?
So in one of our theories, this is the intersection we believe she was last seen.
You say she was walking. She wasn't running at this point.
This was her cool-down period. This was the end of her run.
Robert Chody was just recently elected. He's the third sheriff to oversee the case of Rachel Cooke. It will take Chody on a dizzying journey involving a riveting cast of characters, all of whom will get a thorough re-examination. You'll hear about Rachel's seemingly obsessive ex-boyfriend.
He was like, I gave her 4 years of my life. She can give me 4 minutes of her time.
Rachel's own father, who failed a polygraph.
Many people were saying that, well, he did it then.
The suspicious young men cruising the neighborhood.
There were some reports of a certain type of vehicle being seen, some guys driving around. What can you tell us about that?
I can tell you that's true.
And most compelling of all, a convicted murderer who played Rachel's family and police like a fiddle.
And I remember getting a call from one of her family members saying, hey, something big is gonna go down. We're gonna have a press conference, and I think we got him.
Chody inherited the case from two previous sheriffs, and there are those who will tell you a veritable mess was thrown in his lap.
Do you believe a lot of time was wasted because the authorities didn't take it seriously enough?
Yeah, in fact, what they told me is during my questioning that they truly think that she just took off with somebody. She's a young, beautiful woman, and I was like, okay, how does that make sense? So she's living her dream life in San Diego, having all these plans, and then to come back to Texas to then run away?
And while it's common practice in many jurisdictions to wait 24 hours to begin a missing persons investigation, that wasn't the case in Georgetown.
The 24-hour rule of reporting missing people, that's not true. And I don't know what the motivations were behind the administration prior to that.
Reportedly, then Sheriff John Maspero demanded the Cooke family not be questioned. According to former Lieutenant John Foster, who worked Rachel's case, I was told that was not going to happen, and that was per the sheriff that we were not to question the Cookes.
I mean, they dropped the ball, man. They dropped the ball.
It's easy to understand why the Cookes began their own investigation even before the police. They called hospitals and friends.
Robert went and started driving the route that she used to run.
They called the Wildfire restaurant where Rachel would pick up waitress shifts while in town. That call turned out to be a cruel twist of fate.
When I called, I said, is Rachel working there tonight? And they said, yeah. Well, I didn't know that wasn't my Rachel. It was a different Rachel. There were two Rachels.
Oh, that's awful. You lost so much precious time.
So I lost time there.
By the time police did get serious, it was too late. Rachel Cooke's perplexing case went into an investigative deep freeze. But former Sheriff Maspero fiercely defends his record, telling our affiliate KXAN in 2011, I brought in the finest people I could think of, the Rangers, FBI, APD. We went beyond the scope of what was called for, and I'm disappointed Rachel's case is still unsolved. Maspero was forced out of office while being investigated for serious misconduct, including allegations of sexual harassment in the workplace, crawling on the floor of a men's club barking like a dog, then biting a dancer, and indecent exposure. Maspero died in 2014.
I don't know if we're any closer to figuring out what really happened that morning.
Not if Robert Chody has anything to say about it, and he does.
So if there's a new sheriff in town,
That's right.
He's marshaled an army of veteran retired homicide detectives to start from scratch.
is the cold room this way, or?
The war room, yes, it's
war
right up
room.
here on the right-hand side. And
Now-
this is what we established as our cold case unit. We have a different set of eyes on it, and we're starting from the beginning and checking every box that we can.
Chody ordered new searches and is plowing through a staggering number of leads, some new and old.
We've had over 1,700 tips. We're still receiving tips today. We've probably had 30 or 40 in the last few months. So we're trying to track down every single lead.
How many persons of interest do you have in this case?
Well over 100.
Persons of interest. That's a threshold that you have to meet to become a person of interest.
Correct.
It's not like Sheriff Chody needs the money or the pressure of solving difficult cold cases.
One way that you are unlike any other sheriff in this country because you really did win the lottery.
My wife won the lottery, but I get to partake in that part of it.
$85 million worth of partaking, in fact. But for Chody, justice for Rachel's family is far more worth its weight in gold. And for Chody, it's personal.
I grew up in a domestic violent home, and it was a police officer that literally saved the day for me and my family. And after that event, I had this drive and desire to serve in law enforcement.
Chody and his team have got to make up for lost time. How does a family survive the pain of a missing daughter? The tortuous unknown.
You know, we were kind of like best friends. We had the same sense of humor. We loved hanging out. In some ways, it even gets harder as I get older, because
The unsolved mystery tainted by accusations of past shoddy police work.
I want to know what happened. I want to bring my baby home, and I'm not going to quit.
Newly minted Sheriff Robert Chody is starting from scratch with a staggering list of 100 persons of interest.
So in essence, you are re-interviewing all of the people who were interviewed the first time.
We're trying to. There's some people who don't want to speak anymore for whatever reason, family members included.
So, are family members on that list? Remember, disgraced former Sheriff John Maspero wouldn't allow the Cookes to be questioned.
Maspero knew that nobody in my family or myself would have done it. I mean, we knew each other, for years, from kids' kindergarten on up.
But later, during the course of the investigation, there was an intriguing event involving Rachel's father, Robert. Remember, at the time of Rachel's disappearance, he was planning to leave work early to take his daughter shopping. When Robert Cooke did eventually take a polygraph, it didn't go well.
The father failed the polygraph test, which is true, but he failed one question. And one question that he failed was, do you know where Rachel Cooke is? And his answer is no, and he fails that.
Robert's ex-wife, Janet, offered an explanation.
They asked him, do you know where Rachel is? And he said no, and it came up as a false answer. That's because we kind of thought maybe Rachel's dead. And Robert had transferred that into Rachel's in heaven. And that was his strong belief. Rachel's in heaven now. So if somebody asked you, that question, well, yeah, it's going to come up as a false answer.
Do you believe that?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do not believe her father had anything to do with it.
Robert became deeply immersed in the leading national missing persons organization, EquiSearch. He even traveled to Aruba to work on the famed Natalie Holloway case, but Rachel was his priority.
He dedicated the rest of his life to locating her, and I don't believe he did that to cover for being involved.
Eventually, his marriage to Janet failed.
Why'd you guys divorce?
He became extremely driven about Rachel's case, and I had to have some separation from that. And he got to where he didn't treat me very well.
100 persons of interest no doubt crowds the field of suspicion, but some gravitate toward the top more than others.
I told him, yo, man, you need to stop calling here, dude. She doesn't want to talk to you anymore. You gotta stop.
Thomas was Rachel's previous boyfriend, and he was not about to give up without a fight, even pouring his heart out to Rachel's new man, Greg West.
He sounded like an emotionally impassionate person, like not in control of his emotions, if that makes sense. I mean, so he just was crying and like
He's on the phone
yelling.
crying with
yeah.
you?
Yeah.
So he finds out Rachel is home for Christmas, and what does he start doing?
She was at this party and he showed up. And so it did not go well, from what I was told.
Can you explain?
Yeah, they like had a huge blowout fight.
What about an ex-boyfriend? Was there an issue with an ex-boyfriend?
That person that you're speaking of was certainly somebody that we were still interested in, and until we can check that box to take him off the suspect list or person of interest list, then he remains on that list.
And then there were those mysterious young men in a white car, seemingly out of place in Rachel's neighborhood during her run.
Somebody saw them in the area that the same time frame that they believe Rachel Cooke to be in that area. So we want to question those people.
But the most chilling aspect of this case involves this man, career criminal Michael Keith Moore, a convicted murderer who once sliced the throat of a 14-week pregnant woman named Christina Moore as she pleaded for her life on her knees. Moore would stun investigators when he came forward and confessed to the murder of Rachel Cooke.
He said that he was the one who kidnapped and killed Rachel and then dumped her body near the Houston area.
It was the break in the closure cops, family members, and an entire community had desperately hoped for.
The sheriff's department had brought me in and talked with me and said, you know, some of the things he's saying, it sounds like these facts lead us to believe that he's telling the truth.
Moore was out of prison at the time of Rachel's disappearance and lived nearby. His involvement seemed plausible. Finally, the day of reckoning had come. Moore struck a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty to Rachel's murder.
He confessed to the murder of Rachel Cooke. That was all we needed.
It was a packed courtroom, the end of a painful journey. All eyes on Michael Keith Moore.
I could see there was just humanity missing out of his eyes. I don't know if that makes any sense.
They were cold.
They were cold. No energy, no spirit there. It scared me to look into his eyes.
4 years after Rachel Cooke vanished, career criminal Michael Keith Moore was about to plead guilty to her murder.
So that's huge news.
It's huge. It's huge news. We got a name. We got a suspect.
Couldn't believe it. I remember the first time I saw his face. He just pure evil.
Did you believe him, though?
I don't know if I believed him or not, but what he did was disgusting. By dragging us through that, he wrote a very detailed story about what he did. Just hearing those things is just too much.
Moore voluntarily confessed, telling police he kidnapped Rachel, bludgeoned her with a hammer, and dumped her body into the Gulf of Mexico.
When he confesses to the murder and gives some detail of the murder, detectives have no choice but to believe what he's saying, because who in their right mind would confess to a murder that they didn't do? And some of what he said made sense.
And then came that long-anticipated day inside this jammed Central Texas courtroom.
Everyone assembles in the courtroom. Michael Moore has confessed to killing Rachel, and he is going to enter into a plea agreement. All the cameras are there. You could see the family excited in closure, right?
But there would be nothing that resembles closure or justice, nothing even close. What Michael Moore had planned was a sadistic hoax.
Calls number 06-1823 K368 State versus Michael Keith Moore. The charge of murder is alleged. How do you plead?
Moore's stunning reversal rocked the courtroom. The convicted killer, con man, and all-around bad guy delivered an emotionally lethal blow to the family of Rachel Cooke.
Repeat that for me.
What did he do to the family by putting everybody through this?
Why would you do that to us? I mean, it's just sick. It's psychotic.
We think that, you know, something's going to happen, and then it's just kind of ripped away from us. So I think a lot of people in my family, it was just kind of like disbelief and anger.
The fact that he admitted to it and then denied it shows you what type of personality and what kind of monster he really is.
But then why say I did it in the first place? And didn't he offer authorities very specific details that made it plausible that he could have been the killer?
Yeah, I don't know how specific or how much information was put out in the media back then. I know that you ask one reason why he did it. He got a ride to the coast. He got to eat some cheeseburgers because he was sitting in a cell in Texas prison prior to that. So he got something out of the lie, if that's the case. You're looking at me like...
Yeah, like he did it just to get out of jail for a little bit to...
It wouldn't be the first time.
The district attorney could not pursue the case against Moore. There was just no evidence to prove he killed Rachel.
And the cross, I don't know who brought it.
For Janet and Joanne Cooke, there's no expiration date on the crushing pain they still feel. Sister Joanne isn't sure she even wants to hear the truth anymore.
You feel that any news you got now would be bad news. Is it almost like you don't want to hear anything?
Sometimes, and I think that's one thing that makes me very different than my mom, is because I think she feels like finding something out will bring closure and relief, whereas me, I feel like it'll just be, it'll be those things that I don't want to see, that I don't want to know are true.
There's another tragic turn in all of this. Rachel's father, Robert, passed away after a long illness, and most certainly of a broken heart.
What do you want me to say?
Robert Cooke went to his grave never knowing what happened to his daughter.
How do you think this permanently affected your father?
I know he felt like he had failed her, that he wasn't there, he didn't protect her. But I don't think that at all. I think he's done so much to try to help her out and try to figure out what happened.
And despite the frustration, the setbacks, and the missteps of previous administrations, Sheriff Robert Chody vows to forge ahead.
And we actually have 4 investigators on her case. That's all they do is they're working the Rachel Cooke case.
And Michael Keith Moore is also very well placed on Chody's list.
Do you think Michael Moore did it?
I think he's a strong suspect, yes.
Still.
With 100 persons of interest, but not a single eyewitness or a speck of physical evidence, it's going to take more than aggressive police work. Chody wants the public to share the workload.
So I really do believe this is a solvable case. We just got to get that information.
Would you say that it's reasonable to assume that if someone out there knows something, if they haven't said it yet or turned it over yet, what makes anybody think that they're going to do it now?
I think because somewhere, someone down the line is going to mess up. I think they've kept the secret for so long that eventually they're going to mess up and they're going to tell somebody, they're going to tell an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, and that person's going to come forward and it's going to say something. And finally, the truth will come out.